My name is Sheila Corona. Welcome to Sassy Seer Sheila and New Light Streaming Love, as this will be seen on both channels. This is the 57th in the RZN Codex series, the last question. The terminal inquiry that collapses every false world by Jason Gray. The original transmission date on this writing was 12/22/2025. RZN-ARC-LQ.000. Terminal inquiry /loop-ender layer classification internal / sovereign eyes status active seal non-decorative functional test. Why all worlds end the same way. Every system, political, religious, personal, ends the exact same way. Not with a collapse, quote, out there, but with a collapse inside the questioner. The world you live in is not just buildings and laws. It is the question you keep asking. The overlay did not rule by force alone. It ruled by keeping humanity inside substitute questions. Substitute questions generate motion. Motion generates distraction. Distraction generates compliance. As long as you are asking the wrong question, you can be managed forever. The end begins when you stop asking for management. The entire overlay is built on one hidden assumption. Under every anxious question is one assumption. Something is wrong. That assumption is the master fuel. Quote, how do I fix myself? How do I heal faster? How do I become worthy? How do I escape this? How do I secure love? How do I get ahead? How do I not fall behind? Different words, same engine. The overlay does not need to convince you of any specific story. It only needs to keep the baseline assumption alive. You are not okay yet. Life is not safe yet. The answer is not here yet. As long as, quote, yet is operating, you remain governable. I couldn't agree more. The questions that are really cages. Most questions are not questions. They are cages made of grammar. They look like curiosity, but they are actually contracts. And in parentheses, quote, if I do this, I will be okay. Bribes. And in parentheses, quote, give me certainty and I will behave. Bargains. In parentheses, quote, tell me the meaning and I will stop trembling. And escape hatches. In parentheses, If I figure it out, I will not have to feel it. A person can spend an entire life asking questions that keep them from contact. Contact is what ends the loop. Why, quote, who am I is not the last question. Who am I sounds deep. It is not terminal. It is often the most refined form of avoidance in existence because it can produce infinite narrative, identity frameworks, origin stories, personality systems, archetypal cosplay, spiritual rank, trauma archaeology, and endless self-interpretation. Well, that's kind of a true statement there, because this whole channel actually started with me asking, who are we? What are we? Because I knew it was more than what I was told my entire life. And it's also part of why I've always had, quote, trouble with the light worker gang, because there's always some answer to that, you always got some guru stepping up with uh, this or that or the other kind of program to help tell you who you are for $19.95, and for only $39.95 with the deluxe program, we can go even deeper, that sort of thing. Um, so yeah, I could see where that's all very true. It keeps the mind busy. It keeps the self active. It never requires the fundamental shift, being here without explanation. Quote, who am I is a beautiful question in a world that is still bargaining, but it is not the final blade. Well, I would say that's true too, because I've gotten to the point where I kind of figured, or at least I thought I had figured out who I am, who we are, so much more than we've ever allowed ourselves to believe. And yet, right? So it still assumes that a quote, who must be stabilized, that identity must be solved, and that the self must be justified into existence. Yeah, I guess that's a really deep programmed condition. The last question only appears when the self stops demanding paperwork. The last question cannot be asked by a seeker. A seeker is someone who believes that truth is elsewhere. Even a spiritual seeker is still running the same engine. Lack leads to pursuit, pursuit leads to temporary relief, leads to renewed lack. The seeker is not wrong. The seeker is in a phase. The last question is not for seekers. It is for the one who has reached the edge of all seeking and discovered the quiet horror. Quote, no answer will save me from being alive. Well, that's true, because everywhere I go, there I still am, right? When that is realized, the machinery breaks, and the last question arises not as philosophy, but as inevitability. The conditions required for the last question. The last question does not arrive through intelligence. It arrives through exhaustion of distortion. It requires the collapse of 5 engines. 1, the engine of performance. You no longer want to be seen as good, right, advanced, healed, chosen, or special. Yeah, I really could care less about any of that. Number 2, the engine of control. You stop negotiating reality into safety through compulsive planning, convincing, managing, predicting. Honestly, none of us gets out of here alive anyway, so I kind of am over that too. Number 3, the engine of escape. You stop needing to leave yourself to tolerate your own life. Now, I kind of enjoy my life, I'm not going to lie. Number 4, the engine of proof. You stop requiring evidence that your existence is permitted. Yeah, no, I don't. I think that's true. Number 5, the engine of time scarcity. You stop living as though meaning is perishable. When these engines stall, you are left with something unbearable to the old self: presence without mission. That is when the last question appears. Pardon me. The last question, not poetic, not mystical, not decorative. What am I doing when nothing is wrong? That is the terminal inquiry. It dismantles the hidden premise. If nothing is wrong, then urgency is exposed as synthetic. Fear is exposed as a strategy. Identity is exposed as a costume. Seeking is exposed as a loop, and control is exposed as superstition. The last question does not solve your life. It removes the false reason you were running from it. Actually, for me personally, I was running from seeing my trauma. And I think that's, from my perspective, most of humanity is running from seeing its wounds and dealing with them, being with them, allowing them to inform us, right? Or maybe that's just part of the whole. Because I know I have, for the most part of my life, run from my larger, more expansive parts of me, the parts that obviously were here for me, the parts that I was projecting out there somewhere as being unacceptable. So the last question does not solve your life. It removes the false reason you were running from it. Why this question destroys the overlay. The overlay is a tension economy. It sells danger, outrage, scarcity, sexual chaos, conflict, doom, salvation, identity, war, and status games. All of those products require the same thing: a nervous system that believes something is wrong. The last question is a solvent. It dissolves the purchase point. If nothing is wrong, then doom has no hook. Outrage has no fuel. Distraction has no urgency, and manipulation has no leverage. This is why the question is, quote, dangerous to the old world. It does not attack the system. It ignores the system's premise. And nothing will upset folks more than being ignored. The last question is not, quote, positivity. This must be stated clearly. The last question is not denial. It is not pretending. It is not, quote, good vibes. It does not say nothing painful exists, nothing should be addressed, or that nothing matters. It says something far more radical. The baseline state of reality is not a problem. Pain may occur. Work may be needed. Repairs may be required, but the foundation is not wrong. The overlay taught humanity to treat existence itself like an emergency. The last question ends that religion. What happens when you ask it honestly? When the last question is asked honestly, three things happen immediately. Number one, your attention returns. You stop scanning for threats that are not present. Number two, your mind stops inventing tasks. Compulsive thinking loses its excuse. Number three, your body becomes the truth detector. If you are doing something for fear, your body tightens. If you are doing something from coherence, your body opens. The last question moves the locus of truth from thought to contact. This is the beginning of real governance, not governance by systems, governance by clarity. The overlay's final defense, turning the last question into a new identity. This is the most subtle trap. The system will attempt to convert even the last question into a philosophy, a lifestyle brand, a spiritual identity, a superiority complex, or a performance of calm. The last question cannot be worn. The moment you try to be someone who asks it, you have left it. The last question is not a badge. It is a blade that cuts badges off. The silence after the question. After the question lands, you encounter silence. Most people fear silence because it feels like loss of identity. This silence is not emptiness. It is the absence of false motion. It is the first time the nervous system is not being recruited. Inside this silence, you stop negotiating your right to exist. You stop arguing with reality and you stop narrating the moment into safety. Something begins to happen that the old world would never permit. Action emerges without justification. What action looks like without, quote, something is wrong. When you act without the baseline assumption, your entire pattern changes. You stop doing things to prove worth, avoid shame, secure approval, outrun fear, or maintain an image. You start doing things because they are true, they are needed, they reduce suffering, they increase coherence, they are beautiful, and they are clean. Your life becomes less dramatic and infinitely more powerful because it is no longer reactive. It is responsive. The three false answers. Most people try to answer the last question incorrectly. False answer number one, nothing. Quote, nothing. That is disassociation disguised as enlightenment. False answer number two, whatever I want, quote, whatever I want. That is impulse disguised as freedom. False answer number three, quote, what I am supposed to do. That is hierarchy disguised as purpose. The real quote answer is not a sentence. Oh, wait a minute. What happened there? Ugh, bear with me, y'all. Somehow or another, my phone jumped. There we go. Nope, that wasn't it either. Okay. Okay, so I think I was at false answer number three, what I am supposed to do. That is hierarchy disguised as purpose. The real answer, the real quote answer, is not a sentence. It is a pattern. It is what you naturally do when you are no longer running. The last question as a living filter. The last question becomes a filter you can run on anything. When you are about to speak, when you are about to react, when you are about to post, when you are about to chase, when you are about to control, when you are about to explain yourself, ask, quote, if nothing is wrong, would I still do this? That's a good question. For myself, I am aware that I still have a lot of what I call, from my perspective, habitual uh, programming and conditioning. And some of it I am interested in putting down because the conditions under which it became embedded within this personality are false. False information, false premise, just false, completely false. And some of it, even though I'm aware that it's all of that, is habitual. It's so ingrained, habitual, that the grooves are very deep. And I've, I've, it has been difficult sometimes to make sure that I catch myself, right? But I like this of because reasserting, well, if there's nothing wrong, how would I behave? If nothing is wrong, would I still do this? If yes, then it is coherent. If no, it is distortion wearing urgency. And for me, I take this distortion wearing urgency is the same for me as programming and conditioning. That which I have had an entire lifetime. I'll be 65 in October, an entire lifetime of said societal, parental programming and conditioning, right? Uh, so this is how the loop ends in real time, not by war, by discernment. And again, now I really see, for me, from my perspective, this whole entire point I've had of my channel. This is me coming to my own discernment publicly. That's all. That's all it is. It's all it's ever meant to be, was my own therapy, uh, questioning myself out loud, that sort of thing, really. So I'm going to back this up and I'm going to read it again. The last question as a living filter. The last question becomes a filter you can run on anything. When you are about to speak, when you are about to react, when you are about to post, when you are about to chase, when you are about to control, when you are about to explain yourself. Ask, quote, if nothing is wrong, would I still do this? Now, like I said, clearly for me, I feel like my programming and conditioning, which was installed with a whole bunch of incorrect information, right? False information. So for me, I'm interested in rooting that out, right? But I still like this because if nothing is wrong, would I still do this? And if the answer is yes, if the answer is yes, it is coherent. Okay, yeah, because it's coherent. See, I'm doing this out loud now. It's coherent to want to see this false programming and conditioning. If the answer is no, then it's distortion wearing urgency. This is how the loop ends in real time, not by war, by discernment. The last question ends spirituality as entertainment. I don't know. Some people think what I do here is a little bit entertaining. I sometimes think it's very entertaining, at least for me. And nobody's holding anybody's feet to the fire for you to be here either. Hence the not monetized, not, hitting everybody over the head for, views and whatnot, right? Uh, so this question ends spirituality as entertainment. Many people use spirituality as an alternate overlay. Endless teachings, endless upgrades, endless vibrations, endless initiations, and endless, quote, next level identities. I know that's true. Like I said, I think that's been part of my whole beef with the new age, new cage, or spirituality crowd, the guru industry, because trust me, it is an industry. Is it, yeah, endless next level identities. The last question cancels that economy completely. It reveals if nothing is wrong, then the need to be, quote, more spiritual is often just another form of fear. Real spirit does not demand performance. That's very true. I feel that's true. Just like real uh, divinity doesn't demand worship, at least not to my mind. Real spirit doesn't demand performance. Real spirit is what remains when you stop trying to become anything. The last question ends relationship drama. Relationship drama is often two nervous systems trying to solve wrongness through each other. That's very true. I feel like that's very true. The last question reveals where you use love to regulate fear, where you use conflict to feel alive, where you use attachment to avoid presence. It does not make you cold, it makes you clean, and clean love is devastatingly stable. The last question ends power games. Power games depend on scarcity. Scarcity depends on, quote, wrongness. When you stop assuming something is wrong, you stop competing for validation. You stop negotiating status. You stop needing to win, and you stop needing to dominate. Not because you become passive, but because the entire arena becomes irrelevant. You become unbuyable. The last question is a return to the original world. Before the overlay, existence was not an emergency. Life had difficulty, conflict, weather, loss, labor. The baseline was not a problem. The overlay's deepest lie was making being alive feel like an error requiring constant management. The last question is the restoration of the original baseline, not bliss, baseline. And baseline is where real power begins. If nothing is wrong, then only truth remains worth doing. And truth does not require urgency. That is the end of the loop. Activation line, not a spell, not a mantra, a functional prompt. Run this, then watch what falls off. Quote, what am I doing when nothing is wrong? No forcing, no performance, no proving. Just ask it, then wait. Jason Gray. Yeah. Well, and I would love to have a chat with anybody who has anything they want to chat about with this. For me personally, I see a lot of my own programming and conditioning as still in here. Not that it's bad necessarily, but it is at the root of my avoidance of myself. And I've been now, and I've been pretty successful for the most part. Um, when I get triggered, right, I root out more of it, right? So for me, that doesn't make my existence wrong. It makes the way I exist, it brings that up for question for me. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but at any rate, I feel like I'm asking the right questions for myself because I am the happiest I've ever been in my life right now. the most settled within my own self. Not wishing I was somewhere else or somebody else or doing something else or, all of those things that you know, think of, it's really almost a rather boring existence, right? In many ways. So I don't know. Reach out. Let's have a conversation about this. Conscious Conversation Essential at gmail.com. Feel free to just comment if you prefer that. Um, wow. I think there's at least one or two more of these, and I'm hoping to have this series completed today. So thank you for being here. As with most of his work, there are some codes at the top of this one. So you can copy and paste or click on the link in the show more section of this video, the description box just below this video. And when you get there, search for it by title. Until we meet again, my friends, be well.